Why did insane asylums suddenly explode across the Western world in the mid-1800s? Between roughly 1845 and 1890, massive psychiatric institutions appeared with astonishing speed in nearly every major city. These were not small clinics or charitable shelters. They were enormous stone complexes, often built on a monumental scale, filled almost immediately after completion. Patient records from this era are thin. Testimonies are fragmented. Personal histories vanish the moment individuals enter institutional care. Many stories are dismissed as madness before they are ever properly heard. Official history offers a simple explanation: humanitarian reform. The rise of moral treatment. Industrialization creating new mental pressures. A progressive society, finally taking care of the vulnerable. But that explanation begins to strain under scrutiny. In 1800, North America had perhaps a dozen dedicated psychiatric institutions. By 1880, there were more than 300. Britain followed the same trajectory, jumping from around 20 asylums to well over 120 in the same period. France, Germany, Russia, everywhere you look, the pattern repeats with unsettling precision. Italy, Spain, the Austro-Hungarian territories, all experienced explosive growth in psychiatric infrastructure within the same compressed window of time. This raises a simple but critical question: where did all these patients come from? The standard answer points to urbanization, poverty, industrial capitalism, the breakdown of traditional communities. Yet the asylum boom does not neatly correlate with industrial growth. In some places it appears earlier, in others later. Rural regions with minimal factories built institutions, just as large as those in Manchester or New York, small towns with populations of 15,000 or 20,000, constructed asylums designed to hold 2,000 patients. Communities with no urban density, no industrial chaos, no obvious source for mass mental illness. The numbers do not add up. The math breaks unless something else was happening, unless the patients were coming from somewhere the official record refuses to acknowledge. Now consider a second timeline, one that official history treats as unrelated, coincidental, or most often non-existent. Between roughly 1750 and 1850. Cities across the world show evidence of a sudden, catastrophic disruption. Buildings partially buried. Ground floors turned into basements. Street levels raised by several feet. Windows that once opened onto bustling streets now stare out at packed soil and stone. Doorways designed for human passage opening directly into earth. This phenomenon appears in cities with no shared culture. No coordinated planning, no common engineering tradition. St. Petersburg, Paris, London, Boston, San Francisco, Melbourne, Buenos Aires, Edinburgh, Prague, Istanbul. The same architectural scars repeat everywhere. Ornate lower-level windows buried underground. Ceiling heights that make no sense for basements. Entire neighborhoods sitting several feet lower than surrounding streets. And always, there is the same silence in the historical record. No clear explanation. No detailed documentation. No coherent narrative describing how or why this happened. We call it the Mudflood. Roughly 1800 to 1860, the same window when asylum construction explodes. The overlap is too precise to ignore. If a civilization-altering event occurred if cities were buried, populations displaced, landscapes fundamentally altered, there would have been survivors. People who remembered what came before. People whose memories did not align with the new official story. People who insisted those basement windows were once ground floors. People who remembered streets at different levels, buildings taller than they are now, architecture that no longer officially exists. Not criminals. Not revolutionaries. Dangerous only in what they knew, and in their refusal to accept the revised timeline. So the question becomes unavoidable. What do you do with witnesses? How do you silence testimony without obvious repression? How do you erase lived experience without creating martyrs? You redefine reality itself as pathology. During the mid-19th century, the definition of insanity expanded dramatically. Before 1840, madness referred to severe, unmistakable mental disruption. But between 1840 and 1880, diagnostic categories exploded. Suddenly, almost anything could qualify for institutionalization, religious enthusiasm, political radicalism, moral insanity, a term so vague it could apply to anyone who defied social norms. Nostalgia, literally homesickness, became a committable condition. Monomania, obsession with a single idea, was grounds for confinement, particularly when that idea involved historical inconsistency or architectural anomaly. Case files that survive are disturbing not for what they describe, but for how thin the justifications often are. A woman who claimed her city used to look different. A man insisting he remembered buildings that no longer existed. Individuals describing a different timeline, a different world. Doctors labeled these memories as delusion, confabulation, temporal disorientation. The diagnosis was standardized. The response was not investigation but containment. Not curiosity but commitment. Patient testimony rarely survives in its original form. Statements were filtered through institutional authorities, rewritten as symptoms, preserved only when they confirmed insanity. Direct writings were often destroyed as therapeutically counterproductive. Names appear in records without histories. Admissions without backgrounds. People with no paper trail before institutionalization, as if they appeared from nowhere or as if their previous existence had been deliberately erased. Look closely at the asylums themselves. Not just their number, but their design, their capacity, their sheer monumentality. These were not modest medical facilities. They were massive stone structures built with advanced masonry, sophisticated ventilation systems, and architectural precision that seems inconsistent with the supposed capabilities of mid-19th century industry. Many follow the Kirkbride plan introduced in 1854, symmetrical, imposing fortress-like. Strangely, many asylums appear in the historical record already complete, already operational, already filled. Construction photos are rare or non-existent. Progress reports are missing. It is as if these buildings had always been there, quietly repurposed. Even more unsettling, many asylums show the same half-buried characteristics as other Mudflood-era structures. First floors below ground level, windows opening into soil, foundations suggesting either construction immediately after a massive geological event or inheritance from a previous era, and unlike other grand buildings of the time, asylums were not celebrated. No architectural journals praising them. No public fascination. They were built, filled, and forgotten when psychiatric care models shifted in the 20th century and these institutions closed. What happened to the records? Destroyed, lost, damaged by fire or water, disposed of as outdated. The destruction often occurred just before demolition or repurposing, as if someone did not want those documents surviving into an era of open inquiry. The silence is deafening. No document explicitly states a global plan to institutionalize witnesses. There is no single smoking gun. But the pattern is unmistakable. Synchronized construction, identical legal frameworks, expanded diagnostic criteria, and a sudden explosion of madness centered on memory history. And reality itself. Britain passes the Lunacy Act in 1845. France follows. American states enact commitment laws throughout the 1840s and 1850s. Russia, Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire implement similar systems. Even Japan and the Ottoman Empire adopt Western-style asylums despite no prior tradition of institutional psychiatry. Colonial territories build asylums before schools or hospitals. This is not convergent evolution. It is coordinated response without acknowledged coordination. How do you erase a civilization without obvious violence? You medicalize dissent. You pathologize memory. You make truth itself a symptom. The witnesses become patients. Testimony becomes illness. Questions become proof of insanity. Official history calls this humanitarian progress. Medical advancement, enlightenment, but the architecture, the timelines, and the gaps in the record whisper something else. They suggest these were not hospitals built to heal, but fortresses built to contain memory. The Mudflood became myth. The witnesses disappeared. And the world moved on, standing atop buried floors, inherited buildings, and a rewritten past never quite asking why so many people had to be locked away at the exact moment reality itself seemed to change.